So we're titling our program, Let's Retire Fire. This program came about because on December 6, 2007, we had a rather large fire downtown. Maybe you remember it. There's a big section missing of the downtown.
The Barrie Fire and Emergency Service conducts a Let's Retire Fire Safety program for older adults during the month of June. And it's so important to have a program for older adults because the fire death rate for people over 65 is 3 times higher than any other age group.
Well, I still forget to stay in the kitchen when I'm cooking, and I know I should.
The number one rule in the kitchen is stay in the kitchen while you're cooking. We don't care what saying you use. Look while you cook, watch what you heat, stand by your pan, as long as you stay in the kitchen while you're cooking. If a fire does happen in the stove, a lot of times these fires happen when people are out of the kitchen and they come back to a fire on the stove. If a fire does happen on the stove, we want you to leave the pot alone. Just leave it where it is. We want you to put an oven mitt on, take the lid, slide it across the top, turn the heat off on the stove, and leave the pot where it is to cool down on its own. A lot of people, if a fire happens on the stove, people want to pick it up and move it. Well, if there's flames coming off the pot, it's now coming at your face, and people will throw the pot to get the pot away from them. As well, a lot of people do everything right. They snuff out the fire with the lid on, and then they want to peek to see if the fire is actually out. That's a no-no because the fire will actually flash on you and come out the pot. Just leave it alone, keep it, let it cool down on its own.
I find we have too much clutter around the stove too, which is very dangerous. So there's a lot of things that I have to go home and review.
When you have a fire on the stove, you want to prevent it from spreading. You certainly don't want to give it any fire load around the stove to allow the fire to grow. So we say clear the clutter. Make sure there's nothing around the stove that can cause the fire to spread, whether it's a spice rack or paper towels or sponges or your oven mitt too close by or combustible kettles. Make sure this stove area is absolutely clear so if a fire does happen on the stove, it's not going to get going bigger. So I'm dressed like this to prove a point. Older adults often have circulation issues, so they tend to be a little colder sometimes, and they want to wear robes or just happen to have this and hanging about, or pajamas or some thin material to keep themselves warm. Don't cook around the stove with sleeves and that can actually reach across. We say don't reach for danger. So if this actually touched the stove, or if this thin material touched the stove as you're cooking, it's going to go up on flames right away. And an older adult might not have the ability to get down and do a stop, drop, and roll. And at that point, they're in extreme danger. When we talk about space heaters, obviously older adults have circulation issues and might be a little colder, and they need to have a little extra heat in their house or their home. So a lot of them have space heaters in here, and we say give space heaters space. That means space all around the unit, not just in the front, but on the back as well. Make sure you have at least 3 foot clearance around the space heater. As you can see, this one has actually gone a little rogue, and these do malfunction on occasion. And this actually caught curtains on fire behind because they didn't have the space behind the space heater.
Well, what I was interested in was the fire in the building, and I feel much safer now than I did before.
A lot of retirement homes or retirement buildings are high rises, so there's an issue of what to do when the fire alarm goes off. When the fire alarm goes off, you've got 2 choices. You either stay or you go. But once you make a decision, you have to commit yourself to that decision. Reasons to stay is if you encounter smoke in a corridor, smoke in the stairwell, if the fire department tells you to stay, or if you're unable to leave. If you're physically unable to leave, you must know how to protect yourself in the apartment, but make that decision when the fire alarm goes off. If you decide to leave, you can't wait until the fire department shows up and then leave. If you hear the fire alarm and you've decided to leave, that is the time to go. As soon as you hear the tones, commit to that decision then. If you leave and you experience smoke in the corridors or stairwells, then at that point back up and get in your apartment. You're much safer in your apartment. If the fire department shows up and you've decided to leave at that point, your window of opportunity of leaving safely has diminished entirely. And if there is a fire in the building, it's much more dangerous to leave at that point. If you decide to protect in place and you're in your apartment, you need to protect yourself from fire. A wet towel at the bottom to prevent any smoke from coming into the door. You can use duct tape along the sides to prevent any smoke from coming in. If there is any signs of smoke entering your apartment, certainly call 911 to let us know that you're in your apartment and that you need to be, attention needs to be directed there. As well, if you're unable to leave and you're physically unable, you can call 911 as well to let us know you're there as well.
Like myself, when I first hear the fire alarm, I want to get out. But I know if I don't get out right away, that stay. Like I learned a lot today, really.
The issues with older adults is they don't want to call 911 because they feel like they're bothering the fire department and they don't want to put us out. When they experience an emergency, they have to know that they need to call 911 to get the fire service there in order to help them instead of feeling like they're bothering us. A lot of times they'll call their friend first before they actually call the fire service, and that's not good. They need to feel comfortable calling 911.